Their foramen magnum, as you can see here, is at the back of the skull. So that is a genetic trait.
Beneath the deserts of Peru, archaeologists uncovered skulls unlike anything ever found. They were longer, heavier, and fused in ways that defied human anatomy. For decades, experts tried to explain them away, calling them the result of primitive rituals or ancient cruelty.
This was seen as a normal, beautiful practice, and nothing like a deformity as we would see one today. But in fact, this is a quintessentially human practice that we have evidence of throughout our history.
But when artificial intelligence analyzed their DNA, the truth that emerged left scientists terrified.
There were certain segments of the DNA that didn't match anything known to be human.
You're seeing concrete, tangible, DNA testable proof that extraterrestrials walked on Earth right among us.
And it may change everything we know about human history. The desert that should have been silent. The Paracas Peninsula sits on the southern coast of Peru, where the Pacific meets the desert, a place so dry and lifeless that nothing should have survived there. Yet beneath its silent sands, archaeologists uncovered something that defied every law of nature. Skulls stretched and fused in ways no human anatomy could explain. What began as a simple desert excavation quickly became one of the most disturbing discoveries in history. In 1927, a Peruvian archaeologist named Julio Tello began excavating the Paracas Peninsula after reports from local farmers that desert winds had exposed pieces of cloth and fragments of bone. Tello was already known in Peru for his deep interest in uncovering the origins of ancient Andean civilizations. He expected to find traces of a small coastal tribe. What he and his team uncovered instead stunned the entire archaeological community. Beneath the empty land was an entire world that should not have survived. The excavation began with shallow digs, but the sand kept giving way to something deeper. Tello's team uncovered a series of carved openings leading directly into the rocky ground. Each chamber widened at the base like a bottle, its narrow neck leading down to a large circular room where the bodies were placed. Inside these tombs were mummy bundles so well preserved that the texture of the wrappings still felt soft. As the workers cleared more chambers, they realized this was no small burial site. According to Tello's notes, there were hundreds of these tombs, forming a vast underground necropolis. It appeared to have been planned with precision, not simply dug at random. The deeper they went, the more the layout resembled a complex city for the dead. As the team unwrapped the first bundles to study the burial method, they found layers of cloth so intricate that it stopped the work for hours. The textiles were extraordinary. Some of the finest examples showed colors that had not faded despite thousands of years underground. Researchers later counted nearly 200 distinct shades woven from cotton and alpaca fibers. The embroidery displayed scenes of priests, animals, and geometric shapes that looked more like coded symbols than decoration. The level of craftsmanship rivaled anything from later Andean empires, yet these burials were at least 1,000 years older than the Inca. Nothing about these materials fit the idea of a primitive society struggling to survive in a desert. The artistry suggested wealth, organization, and a culture that valued ritual perfection. Initially, the discovery inspired admiration. The archaeologists thought they had uncovered the remains of a long-lost noble class. Yet that excitement began to fade the moment the first mummified face was revealed. When the wrappings came off, what appeared beneath them was not what anyone expected. The skulls were stretched far beyond normal proportions, their crowns long and smooth, their shape completely alien to what should be human. Some of the workers stepped back in confusion. Others whispered prayers. The skulls looked human, but only just. According to early reports, several of the excavators hesitated to continue unwrapping the rest. They began taking precise measurements, expecting to find normal proportions. What they found instead defied human anatomy. Skulls that defied human anatomy. When the team began to examine the uncovered skulls more closely, the sense of disbelief only deepened. Measurements taken on site showed that some of the skulls were up to 25% larger and nearly 60% heavier than those of ordinary humans. These were not small variations. They were physical differences so dramatic that even seasoned archaeologists were at a loss for words. They followed no familiar pattern. Researchers first noticed that the top of the skulls appeared unusually smooth. Under closer inspection, they saw something that immediately raised concern. The crown of each skull was fused into a single, solid bone. There was no sagittal suture, the joint that runs from the front to the back of a typical human skull. In every known human being, this suture is visible, even if it becomes faint with age. Its total absence was deeply abnormal. Further study revealed another oddity. The foramen magnum, the opening at the base of the skull where the spine connects, was positioned far to the back instead of near the center. That change would have affected how the head balanced on the neck, possibly altering posture and even the way these people moved. These observations led to heated debates. At first, scientists tried to explain it as a cultural practice. They suggested the skulls were artificially deformed through head binding, a known custom in several ancient societies. According to anthropological records, head binding began in infancy, when the bones of the skull were still soft. Wooden boards or tight wrappings would shape the head gradually over time. It was believed to symbolize beauty, status, or intelligence. The explanation seemed reasonable, but the data refused to cooperate. The proportions of the Paracas skulls were far beyond what binding could create. Their cranial volume was not only elongated but also significantly expanded. Even experts who studied cranial deformation agreed that while you could change the shape of a skull, you could not increase its total volume. Bones might stretch, but they do not grow heavier and denser through external pressure alone. According to reports from the excavation, the structure felt different when handled. The skulls were thicker, stronger, and appeared to have grown naturally into their strange forms. It was as if the shape was biological rather than artificial. These findings left the researchers uneasy. If the deformation theory was wrong, then what was left? Some believed they were looking at an unknown branch of ancient humanity. Others suspected a genetic mutation that had vanished from history. None could prove their theories, and the mystery only deepened. If head binding could not explain it, only one thing could. The answer had to be hidden in the bloodline itself, and to test that, they needed technology far beyond the microscope. The DNA that refused to speak. For decades, researchers believed that the mystery of the Paracas skulls could be solved through science. If these people were truly different, the proof had to be written in their DNA. In the early 1990s, teams of geneticists collected samples from hair, bone fragments, and teeth, but every attempt ended in failure. The genetic material was too old and too fragile. Thousands of years underground had broken the DNA into countless microscopic pieces. When scientists tried to read it, the results came back corrupted. The sequences were incomplete, unreadable, and impossible to compare with any known human database. By the early 2000s, the project had stalled completely. Laboratories across South America and Europe had all tried and all failed. Each sample produced only fragments that could not be matched to anything in existing records. For many archaeologists, the Paracas mystery became a dead end, a frustrating puzzle that science simply could not solve. Some experts even suggested abandoning the tests altogether. They argued that the remains were too degraded to yield anything reliable, but not everyone agreed. A few scientists insisted that the technology was the problem, not the skulls. If a more advanced system could rebuild the shattered code, they believed the answer would finally appear. That opportunity came years later, when a research group gained access to an experimental algorithm used in advanced genetics. It was a form of artificial intelligence built to recognize biological patterns across millions of data points. The system was originally developed to study extinct species like mammoths and ancient hominins. Its design allowed it to search for relationships within damaged DNA by identifying repeating markers that human analysts would miss. According to reports, the decision to use the AI on the Paracas samples came after every other method had failed. The team prepared the fragments with extreme care. Bone powder, hair strands, and preserved tissue were scanned, digitized, and fed into the algorithm. Then they waited. For several hours, the AI processed the data silently, aligning one broken strand after another. In the control room, the researchers watched the code scrolling across the screen, line after line, as the machine attempted to rebuild what time had destroyed. Everything appeared to be running smoothly, but as the process neared completion, one of the monitors displayed a result that no one had seen before. Instead of classifying the sequence within known human ancestry, the AI generated a different label. The display read only 2 words: unknown origin. The team thought it was an error. They checked the code, reset the parameters, and ran the test again. The same words appeared: unknown origin. It was a small phrase, but it carried a heavy implication. Something in that DNA did not belong anywhere in the human record. The AI wasn't malfunctioning. It had recognized something it could not identify. And that was only the beginning. When the AI started acting strange. At first, the team thought the unknown origin label was a simple error. They had seen odd classifications before when dealing with incomplete or heavily damaged DNA, but when they reloaded the Paracas data into the system, something unusual began to happen. The biological samples had already been digitized into data streams, allowing the AI to reprocess them without touching the fragile remains. What followed did not feel like a technical glitch. It felt deliberate. Inside the lab, the scientists noticed that the AI was not following its normal sequence. One technician leaned closer to the monitor, frowning at the delay on the screen. Another whispered that it felt like the system was hesitating, as if unsure what it was reading. Normally, the program would analyze each fragment in order, compare it to global genetic databases, and gradually rebuild the genome. This time, it seemed trapped in a loop. The AI kept returning to the same sections, scanning and rescanning them, as though it was looking for a match that did not exist. According to reports from the research team, the system's internal logs showed hundreds of failed attempts to align the Paracas sequences with any known human markers. Each time it reached a specific point in the genetic code, the program's response time dropped sharply before restarting the analysis on its own. Then, without warning, it began to rewrite its search parameters entirely, almost as if it was trying to redefine the rules of classification. The data kept coming back with the same message: out of range. It was clear the algorithm recognized the fragments as organic, but it refused to identify them as human. That was when the team realized this was not an ordinary malfunction. The AI was finding something it could not process, something that did not belong in any genetic library. Then the unexpected happened. The system started detecting repeating gene structures within the damaged DNA. Random mutations are common in ancient samples, but these repeats were precise and evenly spaced. To the researchers, it looked intentional, almost like a rhythm built into the code. The AI converted the pattern into a visual map, something it did to highlight repeating sequences, but the shape that appeared on the monitor froze everyone in the room. It was a spiral. When the image was compared to the symbols found in Paracas burial textiles, the resemblance was undeniable. The scientists reran the test across more than 50,000 genome samples from around the world. Every search returned the same conclusion. At the bottom of the report, in a space normally reserved for technical notes, appeared a single line. It read, "Partial classification, incompatible with Homo sapiens." That line should have been impossible, but it wasn't. And when the team began to decode what those anomalies meant, The truth turned from strange to terrifying. The genes that shouldn't exist. What appeared on the screen was something no one could have prepared for. The genetic sequences inside the Paracas skulls contained structures that did not exist in any catalog of modern or ancient human DNA. Even the technicians who worked on prehistoric genomes said they had never seen patterns like these. The deeper they looked, the clearer it became that this was not a simple anomaly. The DNA carried instructions that did not belong to any known branch of humanity. According to the analysis reports, several genes linked to skeletal development showed extraordinary variations. The markers responsible for bone density were 2 to 3 times stronger than normal human readings. This single difference could explain why the Paracas skulls were so much heavier and thicker than those of ordinary people. It was not a product of artificial shaping or compression. The density was built in from birth. Another section of the genome revealed mutations in the proteins that control oxygen binding in the blood. These changes would have allowed the body to absorb oxygen efficiently in thin or high-altitude air. It was a trait rarely seen outside populations that had lived for millennia above the Andes. Yet the Paracas region sits at sea level. Even more alarming were the sequences tied to brain growth. A small cluster of neural growth factors appeared well beyond the expected human range. This could suggest faster brain development or even altered neural connectivity. Some experts who reviewed the data privately speculated that these mutations might have affected cognition or perception. Nothing was certain, but the results left the team deeply unsettled. These differences explained the skull's unusual size, shape, and fused structure. They were not the result of cultural practices or ritual deformation. They were biological. Then came the most shocking finding. Among all the samples, one stood out. It was labeled Paracas 33. When its genetic profile appeared on the screen, the team immediately noticed that something was different. Unlike the other samples, it contained almost no trace of Native American ancestry. Instead, its mitochondrial DNA, the maternal genetic line, showed strong alignment with markers found in ancient populations from the Caucasus region and Mesopotamia, thousands of miles away. This made no historical sense. Those genetic groups are tied to early civilizations in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, not South America. No known migration route or archaeological record connects those areas to Peru 3,000 years ago. For that ancestry to appear on the coast of the Pacific would mean a movement of people that history has never recorded. The only explanation, according to the data, was that Paracas 33 carried genes from a lineage that had split from other humans long before recorded history, evolved separately, and somehow resurfaced in ancient Peru. The room reportedly went silent. Some believed the data was contaminated. Others stared at the screen in disbelief. For the researchers, that was the moment the Paracas mystery stopped being a question of culture or tradition. It became a question of biology itself. They were no longer studying a deformity. They were studying a different design of human. To verify whether Paracas 33 was unique, the AI was instructed to scan other ancient genetic databases. That decision uncovered something even worse. The same code appeared again, hidden halfway across the world. The pattern the AI was never meant to see. After the Paracas 33 results, the team could not stop questioning what they had uncovered. To confirm the anomaly, the AI was instructed to cross-reference its data with every available record of ancient human DNA. It began scanning thousands of samples collected from archaeological sites around the world. At first, the researchers expected the search to return nothing. But within hours, the AI started detecting faint traces of the same unusual genetic markers in places no one could have imagined. According to reports, the first matches appeared in DNA recovered from burial sites in Egypt. The same irregular code, barely visible but undeniably present, showed up in remains dating back more than 4,000 years. The AI then flagged similar patterns in samples from the Caucasus Mountains and Mesopotamia. Each site represented an ancient civilization known for its sudden leap in technology, architecture, and astronomy. The realization spread slowly through the lab. These regions were not connected by time or geography, yet they all shared a microscopic fragment of the same genetic signature found in the Paracas skulls. When the data was plotted on a map, the results were even more disturbing. The points formed a clear curve across the ancient world, following what would later become historic trade routes. From the Middle East to the Mediterranean, then across the Atlantic and down the coast of South America, the genetic trail created an almost perfect arc. It looked less like coincidence and more like evidence of a forgotten migration, one that no historian had ever recorded. The AI was then instructed to visualize its results. On the screen, a network of colored lines appeared, linking every site that contained the anomalous markers. As the image expanded, the pattern took shape. It wasn't random. The connections spiraled outward from a single point, forming the same spiral design found on Paracas textiles and engraved in their tombs. The room fell silent. The scientists stared at the image, realizing what it meant. If the data was accurate, this was not an isolated mutation or a local genetic drift. It was a connected lineage, one that had left traces across continents. The implication was staggering. The Paracas skulls were not the beginning of a strange biological experiment. They were the echo of something much older, a surviving branch of a civilization that may have spread knowledge, art, and architecture to cultures around the world. Some of the researchers were fascinated. Others were frightened. If the world had once been connected by a forgotten bloodline, someone, somewhere, would have a reason to keep it buried. The final sequence. After the global comparison, the team decided to rebuild the genome one last time. They wanted a final, complete model that other laboratories could verify, a clean reference that would settle the controversy once and for all. The AI was instructed to use every verified fragment, every confirmed sequence, and every correction gathered during months of testing. At first, the process ran normally. Then, as the reconstruction neared completion, something unexpected appeared on the screen. The new sequence contained a repeating rhythm embedded deep within the genetic code. It cycled at precise intervals and then began again, as if the DNA itself were following a programmed beat. The analysts assumed it was an artifact caused by damaged data. They tried removing random fragments and reshuffling the sample order, but the loop always returned. According to internal notes, the repetition remained perfectly stable, no matter what part of the code they deleted. One senior statistician calculated the odds of random damage producing the same loop across multiple runs. The probability was so small that no one in the room spoke for several minutes. To understand what they were seeing, the team used the AI's visualization tools. The system converted the repeating rhythm into a visual waveform so it could be studied more easily. What appeared looked nothing like noise. The line rose and fell in a steady cadence, like a pulse. As more fragments were added, the pulse grew stronger instead of fading. One of the researchers reportedly described the moment as deeply wrong. The sequence did not look dead or decayed. It looked as if it was waiting for something. The team brought in outside consultants to interpret the data. Their opinions divided sharply. Some believed the pattern was a computational artifact, a side effect of how the AI predicted missing code. Others argued that the spacing matched real biological behavior, specifically how genetic regulators switch genes on and off in a controlled rhythm. A few went further. In private exchanges, they suggested that the repetition behaved like a checksum, a built-in test signal meant to preserve data integrity. If true, that would mean the loop was intentional. It would mean someone, or something, had written it that way. According to reports, the university's ethics board was notified. The Paracas remains were sealed again under strict chain of custody. The data files were archived, encrypted, and locked from further access. But one trace could not be deleted. The reconstructed sequence remained inside the AI's own memory cache, a residual file that reappeared every time the system restarted. Technicians tried to remove it repeatedly, but it always returned. Eventually, they logged the anomaly and shut the project down. The researchers left the lab uneasy. Some were relieved to see the work end. Others could not stop thinking about what they had seen, a living rhythm buried inside ancient DNA. The Paracas mystery had gone from an archaeological question to something far more unsettling. We did not just discover the past. It might still be here, watching us through the code. The Paracas skulls were buried for 3,000 years. Maybe they were meant to stay that way. Do you think these skulls should have ever been uncovered at all? Was the AI simply doing its job, or did it awaken something that was never meant to be found? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below.